So we wanted to get backyard chickens for a really long time. So much so that when we were looking for a home in the suburbs, we only looked in areas that we knew we could get chickens in, that allowed for chickens. And so we bought a home, but it was still seemed really intimidating, and it took us a long time to pull the trigger on finally getting chickens. So we're going to share in this video all about what you need to get started with backyard chickens and how it's not nearly as intimidating as we initially made it out to be.
So like Jim said, we had looked for the house in the, unincorporated area where we could have chickens, or at least we thought we could have chickens. But we didn't actually get them until we were trying to start a family, like kids, not just chickens, but get pregnant and have a baby. And I got pregnant, and we miscarried that first baby. And I was devastated. And so I took my sadness that very same day that we found out that we had the miscarriage, and I said to Jim, like, set up that coop, we are getting chickens. And I was just like ready to mother something, and so chickens it was. And so that very same day, he was in the backyard setting up the coop. I think the next weekend we went out and we got ourselves some chickens, and that was kind of how the final nudge to get us to actually go for it and get chickens. But we are so glad that we did.
Yeah, so we set up the coop, I got it in the backyard, and so to start, we didn't get like day-old baby chicks. Like a lot of times you'll find them a day old. We reached out to a local farm that was selling chicks, and ours were probably a couple weeks old.
Yeah.
But what we did was I just took the box from the chicken coop. We had this like little kit chicken coop from Costco. It fit like 5 or 6 backyard chickens in it. And so we got 6, little 2-week-old baby chicks.
To max it out.
And I took that box from the coop and set that up in our living room as kind of a makeshift brooder for the chicks. And we put some bedding in there, got some, chick starter feed and some a little watering bowl thing. Set it up for them, brought home those chicks, raised them up for a couple weeks inside. So if they were like really tiny, like one day old chicks, we would have for sure probably wanted to get a heat lamp and put a heat lamp on them for some extra warmth. But our house was already plenty warm for chicks that were a couple weeks old. And so that's all we really needed to get going those first couple weeks.
Yeah, so the first thing is having some sort of brooder set up for your baby chicks. So whether there's so many different options for this, and we actually have a blog post that specifically addresses all the different, brooder options, so we can link to that below. But, if you're keeping them outside, you're definitely going to want to make sure that they have plenty of heat with heat lamps. There's lots of different styles. If you're keeping them inside, like Jim said, even for that first week, they might need to have a heat lamp on them just to make sure that they are warm enough. But really, after the first couple weeks, they're going to be fine. We move our chickens out to the coop usually around, say, like 8 to 10 weeks. Maybe once they start getting their feathers in is a good time when they'll be ready to move outside. Depending, if it's like super cold outside, you may want to wait a little bit longer. But as long as the temperatures are reasonable, that would be a fine time to move them out into the outdoor coop.
Yeah. So let's talk about the coop itself. What do you need with the coop? So, like I said, we had this little kit coop. We put it together. It's pretty simple, easy to assemble. The number one thing with chicken coops is predator proofing them. And so we have a whole nother video on that as well that we can link to. But the kind of rundown of it is that you need to think of all 6 sides of the chicken coop. There's the 4 sides and then the top and the bottom. And you want to make all those sides as impenetrable as possible, because predators are pretty crafty. They will find ways to get into things. They'll dig under. You might have aerial hawks and things coming in. So they
can even do little latches.
Yeah,
sometimes.
like raccoons have little,
nimble
work
fingers.
their fingers. Yeah. So you gotta really do as much as you can up front to predator proof your coop, and not have the horrible experience of one day waking up and realizing something had gotten into your coop and you're starting back at square one, because that is the worst experience ever. So
yeah.
So that said, everything else inside a coop is really pretty basic. So you need a good source of food and water, for one, that's, obvious. You also need some sort of roost for your chickens, so something basically that they perch on, especially at night. They'll sleep on like a bar of some sort, and then laying boxes is another thing. And so for feed and water, so we just get your pretty like standard, like if you go to a farm store or something, pretty standard feeders and waters. You don't have to get anything fancy. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy systems that hook up to gutters and downspouts and automatically refill and things, but just get the basic thing to get going with. It's really easy, and we've flip-flopped different feeds that we've used for our chickens. We've gotten soy and no soy, and we try and always get organic, but there's lots of options out there. You just need something basic to get going with for your chickens.
Yeah, if you have some sort of local feed store, like animal garden store,
Yep.
try there.
Yeah, find something, whatever your local option is for feed. Water, you really just have to make sure that they have a clean source of water every day. So I try and always just fill it up, because sometimes they just guzzle it, and you're like, where'd half the water go or something in one day?
Or they poop in it, and then you want to clean it out.
Yes,
put fresh water in there.
Yeah. So for a roost, there's lots of different styles out there. If you just have a small coop, like ours just had this little like house enclosed portion of the coop when we had it in our backyard, and it just had two little bars that sat up there, and that's what they roosted on. You can build some, like if you have a bigger coop, you could build like a ladder style roost. That's what we have now in our barn. It's just like a ladder, it's slanted, 45-degree angle with some bars across it. That's all you need for a roost. And then laying boxes, you just want to make sure you have enough laying boxes for your chickens. I mean, if you only have 10 or less chickens, 2, maybe 3 laying boxes is fine. If you have more than that, like right now we have like 50 or 60 chickens.
Yeah.
And so we have 8 laying boxes, and they still like lay all over our barn and stuff like that. So we're chasing it all over the place. But you just need it's like a 1 foot by 1 foot small little laying box, just something to give them some privacy so that they can lay an egg in peace and do their thing.
Yeah. So some other things that you might think about with having backyard chickens, like Jim said, that's really the basics. That's really what you need, but there are some other things that can be helpful. So oyster shells is one. Chickens need a source of calcium, especially if you notice if their eggshells start to be soft or they start pecking at their eggshells, they could be deficient in calcium. And so it's important that they have a good source of calcium in their diet. Oyster shells are a great source of that, or you can even take eggshells, grind them up into like a, just powder or just small eggshells, and give them that as a good source of calcium. So some sort of source of calcium is good. We also will regularly add a little bit of apple cider vinegar to their water, just as an electrolyte, extra minerals, good gut, gut healing properties. So apple cider vinegar, sometimes we'll even sprinkle a little salt in there too for electrolytes and minerals. Any other of those added things?
I forgot to mention this with the coop. So the other thing you'll want to make sure you have in there is some sort of bedding on the bottom of the coop, like either wood shavings or straw or even like wood chips, something like that they're going to poop in there a lot. And so something that you can kind of clean out and replace just to keep it fresh in there. And it's really important to make sure you keep it dry in there too. That's when just different like sicknesses and things can pop up with chickens, as if they're kind of living in unsanitary and kind of wet, moist conditions. So just want to keep it dry, keep it clean.
Yep. Another factor to consider is whether you're going to let your chickens out during the day or whether they're going to stay in the coop. So, if you're in kind of a urban or suburban area and you have like an enclosed fence, letting them free range might be a great option for you. Or if you're in an area where that isn't an option, you might want to consider how big your run is that the chickens have. So if they're just living in a tiny little coop, that could get kind of cramped for them over time. So it's nice to give them a place where they can at least move about, run around a little bit. And so it's just another thing to consider. But there's really not a right a right or wrong way to do it. It's just different options to consider.
Yeah, and the run, if you're not familiar with it, so oftentimes there's just the coop that they live in, and then you can build like a bigger run, which is just kind of a mostly enclosed or full or even fully enclosed area that just gives chickens a larger area to access. There is the option too of a chicken tractor, which is a movable chicken coop. So that's what we actually did. We had the stationary kind of smaller coop in our backyard at first, and we let them free range, but we were running into some issues with.
We had set up some temporary fencing, which we thought would keep them in, and they
got into
out.
neighbors' yards all over the place. So anyways, we built a chicken tractor, which was a movable coop, and that was great because we moved it to fresh grass every day. And so it gave them the ability to kind of, be on fresh grass and still kind of roam around a bit, but they were enclosed, which in our situation where we didn't have any sort of perimeter fence and we needed them a little more contained, that worked out great.
So just to wrap up here, some of the kind of last frequently asked questions that we are regularly asked about our chickens. Can chickens eat your food scraps, your kitchen scraps? Absolutely yes. So we love feeding, our leftovers to the chickens. We have a, compost bin that we collect those food scraps in a couple times a week. We're out there giving them to the chickens, our strawberry tops or our carrot peels, things like that, and they love it and gobble them up. We are also often asked about keeping a rooster and whether or not it's a good idea or not a good idea to have a rooster and kind of what that, relationship has. And so when we lived in the suburbs, we never had a rooster. It was not allowed to have a rooster. The one time we did have a rooster, someone called on us and we had to get rid of our rooster. So
it was an accident.
It was an accident. We didn't mean to have a rooster. It just
happened.
Sometimes that happens. But having a rooster, I think some of the advantages, so it's totally not necessary. We went for many years of having just hens, and that was fine. I think one of the advantage to having a rooster is that, you hear of the pecking order. So hens definitely have a pecking order, and especially if you just have a flock of hens, you will see that pecking order play out. You will see who the chickens at the top are and who the chickens at the bottom are, and it will be very clear in their relationships. Chickens can be kind of feisty sometimes and not so nice to one another, and so you will see that dynamic play out. When we moved on to our homestead here with a little more space and let our chickens free range, we also have had roosters and incorporated roosters into our flock, and I think one thing that the roosters do is really keep the hens in line and keep them from being maybe so catty and having that. I just haven't seen the pecking order thing happen so much since having a rooster in the flock.
Yeah, they also help the hens feel a lot more protected because that's what part of what they're there for too is playing the role of protector of the flock. And so we also always got the question of, can chickens lay eggs without a rooster? And if you're wondering that, yes, they can. So they'll lay an egg either way. It's just a matter of if the egg is potentially fertilized with a rooster, or if there's no rooster, it won't be a fertilized egg for sure. So
yeah, and even if it is a fertilized egg, as long as you're collecting eggs on a daily basis, you won't even know the difference till it tastes great.
Yep. So that's kind of a basic rundown of just what you need to get started with backyard chickens. And we are going to be your biggest cheerleaders and fans, to
you can
go out, get backyard chickens. They're so much fun to have. Like, seriously, our first year of having them, that was like all we wanted to do was like sit in our backyard and watch our chickens because they were just so much fun, so entertaining to watch. And I called them my therapy chickens because I'd like come home from work and all I wanted to do was like grab, my favorite chicken was named Watson, and she would just like run up to me and let me hold her and I would pet her. She was my therapy chicken. And so not to say there's going to be things or could be things that pop up along the way. A chicken gets sick or whatever, but there are so many resources out there and like groups that you can join to help troubleshoot and just, search for things, look things up and try and, figure it out, what the issue is, help your chicken out. And part of the reality is too, we've lost chickens before. It's sad, it happens, it's hard. But overall, like having chickens is just so much fun and so worthwhile. And like you'll be checking for weeks in the laying box, waiting for that first egg to come. And when that egg comes, man, it is like so awesome.
It's the best.
Yeah, so worth it. And then you just keep getting eggs from there, and it's just, you know, like the chickens become like part of your family. They give to you and you give to them, and it's just a fun relationship to have. So that's basic rundown on backyard chickens. So thanks so much for watching today, and we'll see you next time.